A popular trend in the gaming PC market right now, apart from taking out a second mortgage, is to build a really powerful system in a tiny package. Modern manufacturing process improvements have helped increase the efficiency of PC hardware. These optimizations have allowed really impressive systems to fit inside itty-bitty living spaces. Today's video will showcase my take on this trend and also demonstrate how far we've come in this regard. The goal of this build is to create a machine that can realistically fit in any setup, both aesthetically and spatially. There are three things that you really need to take into consideration when building in a case this tiny. That's compatibility, heat, and power requirements. Obviously, you need to make sure your parts are compatible with one another in any build you do, but it's especially important when building in a case this size because not all hardware is necessarily going to fit, even if they will technically work together. The heat doesn't really have anywhere to go, and it's not often that you can fit sufficient airflow in a case this tiny with all the hardware packed so tightly together. And then power consumption is the final concern. The obvious solution is to resort to a larger, more powerful power supply. This is an SFX power supply that would need to go in a case this tiny, and they often are not offered in sizes much larger than 500, 600, 700 watts. It becomes increasingly more difficult to find them, and they also become increasingly more expensive. So what kind of parts are we planning to throw into our machine? Well, to start off with the CPU, we're going with a very high-end processor from AMD. This is the Ryzen 7 1800X, and it sits at the very top of their consumer market, the very best processor you can get without getting into the Threadripper territory. It has 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.6 GHz, a boost clock of 4 GHz, and it has a 95-watt TDP. Price is interesting because this processor first released at $499. It's currently on sale in most online retailers for $319, and if you're fortunate enough to live close to a micro center, it's actually found for as cheap as $279, which for the amount of performance you're getting is an absolute insane bargain. To keep that powerful processor cool, we're resorting to liquid cooling, and for the purposes of this build, we're using the Arctic Liquid Freezer 240 that was given to us for the purposes of this build. The radiator is 38mm thick, and it comes with 4 120mm PWM fans. Size restrictions of this case means we'll only be able to use 2 of the 4 included fans. If there's room on the bottom of the case underneath the GPU, that's where we'll put those other 2 fans, but we'll have to build and see if there's actually room under there. And this cooler retails for less than $90, which is a terrific deal considering the hardware that you get. For the motherboard, we're going with a Gigabyte B350N Mini ITX motherboard. It's a pretty run-of-the-mill B-series motherboard. It has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It supports overclocking and dual-channel memory support. Nothing really crazy about it. It retails for around $115. For RAM, we decided to go with the Gskill Trident Z RGB RAM because why not? It's 2 sticks of 8, giving us a total of 16 gigs, which is more than enough for most applications and definitely all games currently available. It's rated at 3200 MHz, but we're going to have to see in the BIOS settings if we're actually able to get that speed. Price for this RAM right now sits around $250, which is definitely steep, but unfortunately that's just a side effect of the market right now. For graphics, we are using a discrete graphics card, but not just any dedicated graphics card. This is the Asus STRIX 1080 Ti, and the NVIDIA 1080 Ti is currently the most powerful gaming-oriented graphics card available. It has 11 gigs of GDDR5X VRAM, a base clock of 1594 MHz, a boost clock of 1708 MHz in OC mode. It requires 2 8-pin power connectors, and this is a big card. It measures 29.8 by 13.4 by 5.25 centimeters, technically making it a 2.5 slot card. Now that should still fit in this case, but it's going to be a really tight fit. Pricing for this card is pretty outrageous. Currently it's selling for around $1,200 to $1,400, which is roughly 2 times the original MSRP of $749. For storage, of course, we're going with an SSD, which in this case we're using a WD Blue M.2 SSD, but it should be more than enough, 256 gigs. You can fit an operating system, a few of your favorite games. Just like performance, pricing for this drive is similar to the 2.5-inch variant, which is for 256 gigs, roughly $80 or $90. Now to power all of this really high-end hardware, we need something with a lot of juice, but still really tiny. That's why we looked over to our friends at Silverstone, who generously provided a power supply for us to use. This is their 650G power supply. It's the most premium SFX power supply that they offer. It's 650 watts, 80 plus gold efficiency rating, uses all Japanese capacitors, it's fully modular, and it can run almost completely silent. It measures 63 by 100 by 125 millimeters, making it extremely compact and perfect for our use case. Pricing for this sits around $130. Now to house all of this hardware, we need a tiny yet very flexible case because some of these components are pretty big. We are using the NCase M1, which measures 338 by 160 by 250 millimeters. It has an interior volume of just 12.6 liters. The exterior is made of an anodized aluminum, and the interior is a powder-coated aluminum and steel combo. If you'd like to see my complete thoughts on this case, I did an entire review on it up in the cards above if you're interested, and it usually retails for around $195. It comes in silver and black. But let's cut to the part you guys actually want to see, the build. I think you're going to enjoy this. Well, that was the most time-consuming build I have yet to do on this channel. On paper, I knew everything would fit, but in practice, it was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. I did have some impressions I wanted to share with you. The power supply I originally wanted to use as an exhaust. This is common in smaller builds to reverse the power supply. However, the included power cable couldn't reach the power supply in this configuration. I originally wanted the fans in a pull configuration where you have the radiator closest to the exterior of the case and the fans underneath it, pulling the air through the radiator. Unfortunately, with all the cables underneath there, some of them are actually touching. I didn't want to risk any of those cables touching the fan blades, so I just reversed that, put the fans close to the outside and the radiator underneath that, and it works just fine. Unfortunately, the 2 extra fans I had that came with the radiator were not able to fit underneath that GPU. If I had just a dual slot card, I think they would fit just fine. I think you could still manage to fit some slim profile fans in between that GPU and the very bottom intake of the case. I don't really know if you have that much of a performance increase, but it'd be interesting to see. The tubing on the Liquid Freezer 240 was just a little bit too long, and we weren't able to position it exactly over the CPU. You don't have a whole lot of flexibility, obviously, in this case, over where you position the radiator, and I couldn't come up with a way to position the cooler so that the tubes weren't going to get kinked until I came up with the idea to kind of make it do a loop, and it kind of winds its way through the other wires and hardware we have in there, and there's no kinks involved, and it positions it perfectly where it's supposed to go. So that worked out actually really well. As we've just demonstrated, it's at least physically possible to cram a bunch of high-end hardware into a tiny box. The PC powers on and all functions are operating as expected. However, it remains to be seen if the machine will stay cool with any significant load placed on it. If the PC gets so hot that it ends up thermal throttling, then all we've really accomplished today is creating a really expensive toaster. So stay tuned for part 2, where we put the machine through its paces and show you the benchmarking results. Go ahead and give this video a like if you enjoyed it and or found it insightful. I did a lot of really intensive editing on this video, so hopefully you guys appreciated that. Show you appreciate it by commenting, liking, and of course, subscribing. I also wanted to do that because we had some very generous manufacturers who provided us with parts for this build. Arctic provided the cooler. You can find that in the video description down below. And Silverstone provided the power supply, which you can likewise find in the video description down below. So check those guys out. Really great hardware from them. And if you want to build this exact machine to spec exactly as we did here, then follow my affiliate links. It'll take you to Amazon, show you exactly where you can find that hardware. And if you enjoyed the music from this video, then check out The Encounter, a composer based in New Jersey who makes that really cool 80s retro music that you heard throughout the duration of this video, and subscribe so you know when part 2 is available. Thanks again for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.